I'd like to talk about Hideo Kojima's 2008 PS3 title, Metal Gear Solid 4. There will be spoilers for Metal Gear Solid 4, but as a general preamble, I don't think there's any piece of information, any spoiler that would change the general consumption of this game narratively. It's so odd in its delivery that it's genuinely difficult to have something ruined. I still have trouble after lots of research remembering who is fighting for what and if they're a double or triple or quadruple agent. Anyways, let's begin by talking about other Metal Gears. So in the interest of being on the same page, I'd like to give a very, very detailed rundown of the plots of Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. Just kidding. The plots of those games are notoriously convoluted, and even the most bare-bones rundown of the series without any fluff would take something like half an hour. I'll instead talk about these games mechanically and in terms of their writing and reception, in regards to their place in the series. Two Metal Gear games released on the MSX computer system in Japan. These aren't Metal Gear Solid. They revolve around stealth and introduce the protagonist Solid Snake. 10 years later, the first Metal Gear Solid game came out. This game sold on the PlayStation in 3D worldwide. It was perfect. It's campy but well spoken. It has lots of tricks and ideas, and it plays fairly well. It's really very incredible. 2 years later, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty was released to less praise. It's a fantastic game, but did some very unpopular things. For one, the game advertised its protagonist as, again, Solid Snake, but after letting the player control Snake for a little bit, the real protagonist, Raiden, takes over. Raiden is a rookie. He's completely different than Snake. He's effeminate, more naive, and untempered. Here's why this is relevant. This was supposed to be the last Metal Gear game. Kojima reported wanting to move on, and then said a third Metal Gear game may be directed by somebody else, but certainly not him. Metal Gear Solid 2 had quite a few open-ended questions, but they were written without a sequel in mind. The game ends on an unresolved note, but it's as a product of the game needing a sort of unresolved, open-ended conclusion. This narratively is exactly where Metal Gear Solid 4 picks up because Metal Gear Solid 3 is a prequel. Enter Metal Gear Solid 3, directed by, of course, Hideo Kojima, who promised he wouldn't direct any more Metal Gear games. Metal Gear Solid 3 functioned, as I mentioned, as a prequel to all Metal Gear games prior, and it was a masterpiece. It's credited as the best game in the series and one of the best games of all time. It's set in a jungle and uses exactly what made Metal Gear so campy and beautiful. The end of this game is truly very tragic and powerful. It's excellent. This, Hideo Kojima reported again, was the conclusion of the Metal Gear Solid series. And now, the focus of this video, Metal Gear Solid 4. There's been a persistent pattern now of games that were promised to be the conclusion of the MGS series, but nowhere is this more clear than in 4. This game wasn't really supposed to be made, and it shows. Metal Gear Solid was made in response to the critical success of 3. Fans of the series were very aggressive in their requests for a sequel, and Kojima reported quite a lot of death threats. This is the first Metal Gear Solid game that feels like it wasn't made with love. It's the first time it feels like Kojima didn't want to create the final product. It's just a bit off everywhere. Of note, though, is that it contains all of the identifiable substance that a Metal Gear Solid game should have. It looks exactly like a Metal Gear Solid game. You play as Solid Snake in a 3D stealth game. You work with Otacon and fight against Liquid. There's a team of bosses in the small unit, and they're even named after the members of Foxhound. There are plot twists and greater conspiracies, and even all of the familiar characters return. But none of it is quite right. The heavy weight of the 3 confusing prior games finally crushed 4. There was simply too much lore, too many attempts to reopen baggage that was intended to be left unanswered forever. Metal Gear Solid 4 was a tremendous mess because it stuck strongly to its heritage as a Metal Gear game. Metal Gear Solid 3 was such a breath of fresh air because it had so much room to breathe as a prequel. Naked Snake could be a different character in the best ways. He was more emotive and charismatic than Solid Snake, but they didn't have to write a new character. He was a snake, just the best parts. Metal Gear Solid 3 had to end in a given way as a prequel, but it had tremendous freedom to explore on the way there. The result was a game with unimaginably many ways to do things. One boss in his old age will die without you fighting him at all if you just turn the console off for 1 week, letting him die of old age.
Drop your weapon. Drop your weapon!
Metal Gear Solid didn't have this room to breathe, starting at a set position with a plot that was intentionally vague and confusing, and having to move to a discernible conclusion, dragging all of the baggage along with it. Characters reappear in bizarre ways. This is actually the first Metal Gear game that brings characters back to this degree. Metal Gear Solid 4 pulls far too many characters from Shadow Moses in Mei Ling, Meryl, Campbell, Psycho Mantis, the likeness of Foxhound, and the guard who sharts himself. I wish I was kidding about that last one. For Metal Gear Solid 2, Raiden, Rosemary, Vamp, Olga's daughter, and the weapons of Dead Cell. For Metal Gear Solid 3, Eva, Zero, Signet, Paramedic. Why did these characters return? This is a major gripe most fans take with the game. The Patriots are known as the Lali Lulelo and are painted as a shadowy organization who control every aspect of government and sought to control the very flow of information. They created Solid Snake and his twin brother Liquid Snake. They're excellent villains and had no face, no name. The Japanese language can be broken into sounds like ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, or na, ni, nu, ne, no. But there's no L. There's no lali lulelo.
Lali lulelo.
Lali lulelo.
The lali lulelo.
Lali lulelo.
Lali lulelo.
Lali lulelo. Lali lulelo. Lali lulelo.
Lali lulelo.
Lali lule. I mean, I'm no patriot.
There's no sound to enunciate the existence of the Patriots. They're sewn behind the fabric of our nation, of every nation. Metal Gear Solid 2 makes them anonymous, and Metal Gear Solid 4 wrote them as being found by this group, by Zero and Signet and Paramedic. Why on earth did the Patriots have to be founded by these goofy herbs? It's totally bizarre and totally fitting for a game that wanted so badly to include every character it ever introduced and hadn't killed yet to conclude the series. I mean, really, I can't think of any characters that were left alive and don't appear in Metal Gear Solid 4. This game, in the worst way, was made with Metal Gear Solid fans in mind, made by a Metal Gear Solid fan. If you're particularly attentive and remember the plots of 5 prior Metal Gear games, you stand a chance at following the twists and turns of who knows what, who's a double or triple agent, what exactly you're trying to do in the big picture, but you likely won't follow most of it, which is remarkable for a game that spends so many hours in cutscenes, in codec, and these little narration windows that pop up constantly. I can't precisely characterize the feeling of excitement and dread that surfaces when one of these appear on screen. On one hand, Metal Gear Solid 4 seems to have a lot to say. It has some interesting ideas and sets up an engaging world, but these narrations are often not as clever or succinct as they ought to be, and eat up so much time. This game has 2 Guinness World Records for longest cutscene at 27 minutes for longest continuous cutscene and 71 minutes for longest cutscene, big quotation marks, sequence. These records show a tremendous amount of this game is spent giving you information which, for the first time, isn't charming. Solid Snake, the handsome, sleek protagonist, suffers from his faulty genetics as a clone and is codenamed Old Snake in this mission. He's no longer needed or wanted. He's asked repeatedly to leave because he's getting in the way. It's hard to watch the coolest protagonist in all of games age so ungracefully.
Yes, Snake?
Anybody got a smoke?
Snake.
It's hard looking at what the world around him has come to, and we wish for a time when Snake wasn't so jaded, when he was needed and respected. Ultimately, this story is tragic because what made Snake a great soldier and character is the same set of traits that won't let him bow out and retire. He was never a hero, and we see it now more than ever. Now pause. Doesn't this sound like very heavy metaphor for the creation of Metal Gear Solid 4 in the first place? A game that was never supposed to be made, that couldn't end gracefully and choked to death on the elements that once defined and sold it. Here's the twist. I love this game. I think it's indulgent and smart, sharp as ever and tone-deaf like no Metal Gear game prior. It's a perfect oxymoron of good writing and unbearable cutscene, great stealth packaged with no good explanation. So here's what I think Metal Gear Solid 4 does right. There's an excellent premise. Kojima's picture of war has AI systems which control our nation, inciting countless wars, funding both sides. There are endless proxy wars, a war economy based off our disturbing fondness for and reliance on hurting one another. Further, nanomachines, which are often used to explain in Metal Gear some of the hairier and more eyebrow-raising parts of the plot, are used brilliantly. They're implemented into soldiers to make them better weapons. The nanomachines are capable of suppressing grief, trauma, anger, and fear, which make humans less human and better soldiers. The weapons are ID locked, the trigger responding only to precise nanomachines every soldier is injected with. As always, the art is perfect. Yoji Shinkawa is beyond genius. The music is also great. Old Snake's theme is among my favorite in the series. I love Olga's daughter, Sunny. There's a very engaging argument about her, a child born in the internet.
Her home is in the computer.
On one hand, Naomi argues she's just a child. She ought to spend more time outdoors, being young and alive. On the other, Sunny is a master coder and hacker. Please roll with this. And who else but a member of the next generation who in equal measure is hopeful and innocent and a baby born in and subsisting on a digital world could right the wrongs of Snake's generation. Ultimately, the one who releases the shackles which bind all of Earth by the legacy of the boss's will, and the boss after her, and the four who set out to change the world after him, is not a boss at all, not a snake, but a child. She has help, of course, but I think Sunny is maybe my favorite character in this game. The settings are perfectly illustrative of how confused this game is. It's a blend of excellent ideas, crippling nostalgia, and poor execution. Unlike other Metal Gear games, 4 has 5 different major set pieces which confuses and muddles the pacing entirely. The first 2 are battlefields. This is an engaging setting for a stealth game. There's a totally new relationship with combat and camo and sound. It works fairly well, though there's no great reason to travel around the world to a different war zone between Acts 1 and 2. Act 3 takes a hard right turn into noir espionage. It's interesting, and it probably would have been a home run if it was implemented in another game where it felt more deliberate and focused. Act 4 continues this motif of insane narrative whiplash by recreating Shadow Moses Island, the setting of Metal Gear Solid 1. It's peak fan service, and it's good, I think. I suspect I love this because I love Metal Gear. That's the whole idea behind this game. I love it, but only because I understand Metal Gear well. It knows its audience well, and only because it's a Metal Gear game that panders nonstop, orates constantly, rests on its laurels, and moments later tries to offer something new, that I love it.
Hold it, Snake. Time to change the disc. I know, it's a pain. But you need to swap disc 1 for disc 2. You see the disc labeled 2?
No.
Huh? Oh, wait. We're on PlayStation 3. It's a Blu-ray disc. Dual layered, too. No need to swap.
Damn it, Otacon! Get a grip!
Yeah, what an age we live in, huh, Snake? Wonder what they'll think of next.
I say all that to say, there's a Metal Gear fight! I mean, come on, you return to Shadow Moses and you get to take over a Metal Gear and fight the other? That's crazy. Metal Gear Rex versus Ray? Is it good? I don't know, but it's a Metal Gear fight. Who cares? Anyways, the final act has Snake board Outer Haven and install Sunny's virus, toppling the AI while saving its basic functions necessary to keep civilization running. There's a great scene where Old Snake crawls through a microwave tunnel. Johnny, the shark guard, recurring joke, kisses Meryl and tells her that he poops his pants so often because he doesn't have nanomachines. That's why he's a klutz. How did no one know he wasn't tethered to the single most influential structure on Earth? How did he mastermind his way out of complete control of the AI?
I ducked out.
Don't tell me you knew this was gonna happen.
Nah, I just hate needles.
These two scenes next to each other are the perfect microcosm of Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 4. Finally, Snake installs the virus and Liquid's plan to control all of civilization and all war is foiled. There is no more war, but Surprise! Naomi confesses that it was her plan, somehow, for some reason, all along. Snake, nearly dead, is taken to the top of Outer Haven, where Liquid Ocelot confronts him and tells him it was his plan all along. Why did Liquid Ocelot do anything that he did in this game? What was his plan? It's unclear. The game ends with a fight between the two brothers. Again, sort of. It's not actually Liquid. It's Liquid Snake's arm sewn onto Revolver Ocelot's body, and Revolver Ocelot hypnotized himself into manifesting Liquid Snake's personality, but he was probably faking it the whole time, he confesses. Do you remember what I said about this plot being notoriously convoluted? Anyways, this final fight pays tribute to all prior games. They don't need to fight anymore, of course, but of course they would. This is the end of the game and series. The end of the Patriots and Les Infanteries. The fight ends with the two old soldiers, old snakes, destroying each other. Otacon gives a speech and... oh, okay. There's an epilogue titled Naked Sin, to be expected. We get a few things tied up and then the credits roll. Now, prepare for a more unbelievable whiplash. Snake, who is tasked with taking his own life so his virus doesn't hurt anyone else, is greeted by Big Boss? The one character we knew for sure was dead. Who we killed? How? Why? In typical fashion, he shows up, delivers a lengthy speech, lights a cigar, and dies. He tells Snake he isn't contagious and laments the truth that the world would be better off without snakes. I'm not spending enough time on this because I don't think I can accurately describe how confusing it is for someone who spent so much time playing all of these games. Now, roll final credits. Metal Gear Solid 4 revels in its indulgence and drowns in what once defined it. Isolated, it was one of the worst games to date, but in the context of Metal Gear Solid, it transcends to something so self-aware and self-destructive, I can't help but to love it. It ended Metal Gear with such a weird and confusing bang, but it never tries to pretend to be anything except the fourth Metal Gear Solid game, wearing its story baggage and confusing plot on its sleeve. There's no other game that could so violently self-destruct just by virtue of being itself. And I love it.
Nowadays, anyone with a computer can get combat training. The FPS games that these children love are distributed for free by these companies. Of course, it's all just virtual training. It's so easy for them to get absorbed by these war games. And before they know it, they're in the real
shut up.
real guns.